Okay, the eighth model is called, oops, I better change the page there, is called the social learning perspective. And again, you'll find aspects of this in any treatment program as well. So if you look back on the conditioning model, that's strictly behavioral. And to some extent, social learning does take in behavior, but they're looking primarily at the influences around individuals or groups and their influence on drinking and drinking patterns. So what it's really looking at is the interaction between that person and, let's say, peers. You know, whether or not they're friends or the people at least that they associate with are drinkers or drug users. And what goes along with that is the concept of modeling. We know that people you find kind of important in your environment provide a model to you. Your parents are an example. Older siblings are an example, and people in the neighborhood can be an example. But people that you look at consciously or unconsciously as an example of how one does things. So going along with that, in addition to the modeling, is something called coping skills. Alcohol and drugs are a great mechanism for coping. You know, it's like I always say, the problem with alcohol and drugs is that they work, but they only work temporarily, and they don't work in such a way that it's a permanent solution for anyone. So what we see with people that have been drinking or using for quite a while is that they need to literally be taught other skills, other social skills or problem-solving skills or whatever it may happen to be. In the treatment lingo, you know, we talk about teenagers and young people as needing habilitation, not rehabilitation. We think of that more with adults, which suggests that, you know, some people already have had the chance to develop skills and they just kind of went to pot. And then we talk about kids who maybe didn't develop any proper ones in the first place. The third aspect of social learning just has to do with cognitive processes, the things that we say to ourselves, the expectations that we have about alcohol or drugs, and that affects it quite a bit. If you expect to have a certain experience on drugs or alcohol, that's going to lend itself to either enhanced response to what you're using, or sometimes even having a reaction that really, you know, goes back to kind of placebos. It's you manufacturing the response more than that thing that you are taking. So all in all, with the cognitive process part, you know, you're expecting something positive to happen. And a lot of addicts and alcoholics will tell you that on one hand, they remember their first experiences extremely well. They're very vivid. And no matter what stage of alcoholism you might be in, where every time you drink it's just a disaster, there is still that expectation of having those great experiences and feeling so great when you use drugs or alcohol. I always said, you know, the first 40 minutes, they're great. And after that, not so much. So, causal factors, socialization deficits. You know, when you come out of a family, you only have just so many tools, right? You may have to learn more as time goes on. Modeling and skill deficits. The interventions. So we help people to set appropriate goals. We provide alternative models. And so that's why we, in the drug and alcohol business, like group counseling. Because usually hopefully, there's somebody there that provides a better example than what you may have. And even the professionals themselves should be providing positive modeling too, showing you different ways of handling stress and conflict and problems in general. Cognitive restructuring means that we teach people how to think differently. One thing you'll see with people early in recovery is they unconsciously have thoughts about drinking or using. It just comes on them. And what we encourage people to do is very simple. It's like, okay, don't just think about that first 40 minutes. Think about everything that comes after, that really does happen. The trouble that we get into, hospitals, jails, cops, angry spouses, all those kinds of things. Because in reality, that's where most people left off. There's this old saying, first thought, second thought. The first thought or reaction that comes to you about things really isn't always within your control. But the second thought is, you can lead yourself to think differently and consequently feel differently intentionally. And that's part of recovery. Skill training, we probably do that more and think about that more with young people than we do older ones. But skill training is basically practicing a different set of skills, problem-solving skills and resolution skills and things like that. Then the last being self-control, which a lot of people need. They don't know how to control their anger. They don't know how to control their fears and anxieties. And so there are different methods available to them, biofeedback and meditation and mindfulness and all of those kinds of things to help people. So the people most appropriate to carry out those interventions would be cognitive behavioral practitioners. And you don't have to be trained specifically in that. You can pick that up as you go. And appropriate role models. So not only is that handy in treatment, but it's one of the strengths, I think, about 12-step groups or support groups in general, aftercare and that sort of thing, is that hopefully you find people that, you kind of look up to, not hero worship, but just people you see have something maybe you don't right at this point, and consequently you'd like to learn more about that. So that's about all I have on social learning, and next we'll be talking about